Good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're watching. I am here in the Florida sunshine with Gil Hedley. For those of you that don't know Gil, a few years ago, gosh, must be 10 years ago now.
It's a while.
It's a while. I was in, well, it was probably about 12 years ago, I was in New York at a place called the Breathing Project with a man called Leslie Kaminoff. I wasn't there for Leslie, but he was running it. Tom Myers was running a workshop, and this guy Leslie, who I met, had said to me, you need to meet this man, Gil Hedley. Must be 12 years ago. So, and he talked about Gil, and Tom said, oh yeah, you should see Gil. Tom knew him. So I went away and looked Gil up, and I attended a dissection in
San Francisco?
San Francisco, I can't remember the year.
Probably 2007, I think.
Something like that. And it kind of changed, actually I'd seen the DVDs beforehand, and it changed my life in many, many senses. And looking back now, I wasn't quite to know how much it had changed my life. But certainly seeing the DVDs and seeing the superficial fascia and the way we're touching things, and you can go to YouTube and see a lot of that on the YouTube now as well, and I'll send you a link for Gil's site as well. So seeing that stuff, it made me realise that what we were thinking we were doing as far as the Bowen move was concerned wasn't what we were taught. We'd always been taught about cross fibre and disturbance of the tissue, and so there was a huge change for me at that point, and that's when I determined to spend a lot more time trying to work out, well, what are we working on, what are the tissues that we're working on, and once we understand the tissues that we're working on, then we can perhaps work out what it is we're doing and why we have the effect that we have. Am I near to that? Probably not. I've got some theories, but
that's all you'll ever have.
So I just thought I'd do a little video today with Gil, who is over the last 10 years has become a very good friend, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Mm-hmm. And mostly
be nice.
It's a British thing.
Be nice, friend.
Be horrible to you.
Don't.
To the people that we love.
We Floridians are very friendly.
Floridians, yeah. So anyway, hello, Gil.
Hello.
So what do you think? You've had Bowen, you've seen it done. What do you think we're doing?
From the start, I've always seen Bowen as what I would call an indirect technique, where the action performed is not the cause of the result that follows.
Say that again. So it's the
action performed, the Bowen move,
yeah.
say,
okay.
isn't the cause. It's a very distant cause,
yeah,
or only a participatory cause in the effect. I would say that it's a chain reaction type thing, exactly. So that there is a trigger that's tripped, a switch that's flipped with the Bowen moves, less so than if you were to use a model of like tissue molding or something like I did when we were Rolfers, and we're told, fascia is a plastic substance that you can change it, and we approached it as if we were.
Have that view?
No, but we at the time, well, we had all kinds of views. Folks have been trying to explain success for a long time, but it's a very difficult thing to do and unnecessary, in my opinion. I love the quote: "Don't ask if it's weird, ask if it works." Or in other words, just like, or my other that was from Barbara Brennan actually, but my own quote would be, take your theories very lightly while you hold your practice, good practices very dearly. So if you have a good practice, run with that. Don't worry so much about you can pursue causation, because you might become more refined in the practice, but at the same time don't put the practice in the dustbin because you can't explain it, and also don't take too much pride in the explanations that you come up with, because chances are they're ridiculous.
Well, I mean, from a Bowen perspective, the explanations that we had when I first learned what such as explanations were pretty basic. Well, we don't really know, and
that works. It
links to the brain and all that kind of stuff. But I like the idea of this sort of non-causation being different from effect. And so my logo for many years was the ripple. So you drop a stone or something into the water, you create a little ripple, and things happen not just at the end of that ripple, but in a global sense. The end of the ripple becomes a sort of a universal effect. That things can be happening in a 360-degree dimension,
Absolutely.
A long way away from the original
Absolutely,
action.
As well as the fact that ripple, that initiated ripple, is as it moves through the form, is going to generate kind of interference patterns, as ripples do, meaning there are other ripples there, and those interference patterns that are interfacing with that ripple that's been introduced are themselves effective causes of solves. That's what I'm saying. Like you put your pebble in the pond, that's fine. But but when that wave comes back and through and works its way around and twigs on the other side and comes back as a whole new thing that you don't even recognize.
Yeah, sure.
And you can take credit for it if you're very lacking in humility, or you can just say amazing. You know, we can introduce something and the body itself will pick up on it and develop it or repeat it or change it
or ignore it
exactly, or ignore it in a way that's needs. That's very important too, because you may be introducing touch that the body's like just sloughing off. It literally sloughs off that perturbation because it's not necessary, and that's the beauty of the Bowen move. You can slough it off.
Yeah.
The beauty of a minimalist perturbation of a system is that the body has no problem saying thanks very much, I don't need that, as opposed to a heavy-handed perturbation of the system, right, where you're doing some heavy-handed manipulation, and you're actually the body can't ignore that. The body can't ignore it, but even if it was the wrong choice,
yeah, sure,
of what you're introducing, and so then you walk away bruised and beaten and disrupted and maybe decompensated even, when in fact a lighter approach could have allowed the body to take what it needs and leave the rest, as we say.
So the other thing I'm very interested in quizzing you about is when I first did your dissection, I was fairly confident with, I got skin and superficial fascia, I kind of got that, and then muscles, but then there was this stuff that you know, my study of my books and my anatomy wasn't bad, I thought, little did I know, and then there was stuff that there was just no name for. There was just bits, there were threads, and the anatomy books, to me, anytime I look, there's nothing in those books that really explain those interfaces that we can feel and touch and move around and slide around. And it sort of frustrates me, because everything is based, you read people on Facebook going, oh, well, this is rubbish and this is rubbish, but their view is based around standardized anatomy stuff they've never seen in a lab, stuff they've never seen in a dissection. They're so sure and clear about it based upon their training, and that's frustrating. So when you get an email of stuff that we haven't, give us a function for it.
Well, yeah, I guess it's already been named. It's called humility, and it's just not often used. It's not often applicable to people. And the thing is, like you say you didn't study your books very well, and I was pausing it. I say you can study your books perfectly and not know what to do or not know what's there, because the books don't include everything, as you're saying. So it's not a matter of whether or not you've mastered your books; it's whether the books have mastered their subject, and they haven't. It's almost impossible to do so, and that's why I always refer to this as my text, right? Because this one never lies. You know, this is the text that am I going to argue with the body about what's in a body? No, I can't really argue with that.
There's stuff that you say, like, you go, what's that? And you peel something off, and there's a sort of skinny little bit of, and you go, that's fascia innominatus, that's unnamed fascia, or
exactly.
an unnamed tissue.
It's the ligament of Julian. You know, I say that all the time because there's so much in there. And what's interesting is where the flags have been posted, and what has, in other words, if a flag's been posted somewhere in the body with someone's name or made it into the book, then we believe it's important. It's like, because something made it on the news, it must be important, so we'll watch. Same thing, because it made it in the book, that tissue must be important, so we'll stare at it, when in fact it might not be the most relevant tissue in the region that you're studying with respect to the problem that you're encountering. So I see that along these unnamed fascias, just general classes of fascia that you encounter in a dissection that don't get any attention at all in a book. There's just not enough pages in the books.
The other end of the scale, you've got the humility of going, well, I don't know what it is, but also then you've got the arrogance of assumed knowledge that says, well, I know everything there is to know about the body, and therefore anything that is not listed in a book or anything that I don't know, we know everything there is to know, when clearly there's all these interfaces and all these structures that we have no idea about.
Well, and they won't even be seen. They'll be invisible. In other words, if you're going to do a book dissection, you're just going to cut out all of the irrelevant stuff that wasn't in the book, and you'll be back to the book again. You see, there it is, how beautiful. You'll compliment one another on what a great dissection it is. I take pictures of half-done dissections because they're the interesting ones to me, because it shows you the continuities of the things that that are refined in these very abstract pictures. Let's get a little less abstract and look at what's actually there. Muck our way through the relationships. You have to muck your way through relationships a bit, rather than creating separate and separable entities through anatomization. That then we can see, oh, we can tick the boxes. This one fits here, and this one fits here, and this one fits here, but that's not what it was. So who cares?
So let's be specific, because there's a specific thing. And I was reading something last night about a guy who was telling us very clearly what iliotibial syndrome was. And yet my puzzle when I go in there is you can't even see this iliotibial band. You go into take the skin and superficial, and then there's this whole sheet of tissue.
Right.
You know, and so my question is that just because you have a tensional bit, is the rest of it less important functional structure, all the bit that's then been trimmed away and thrown in the bin to make that picture? Surely there must be some function or structure around the rest of that.
There's no function in what's remaining without it.
Okay, that's a good point. So no function in what's remaining without the stuff that you've thrown away.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Without those relationships, the thing that's been isolated is no longer functional. Now it's a toy. You just made a toy. It's not functional anatomy anymore. You just made a toy. That having been said, when your attention is called to something in the body, why would they cut it there? Well, because we see this intense fibrous mapping going on in this broader tissue, and you can make it, you can abstractly define it and attribute function to it based on the vectors of the fibers well enough. However, those fiber vectors in themselves are not a functional reality. They've never done anything on their own the way they're being depicted. They're only functioning in relationship to everything else. That's the way it's got to be.
Similar to the Bowen move, you know, we talk about this move here, but in similar vein, you've also got the fibers reaching across the structure that we're thinking about into lots of different areas, and so again you've got this sort of distant cause from both the structure and maybe the move itself. And
yeah, that's right. And causation is always very complex, and even in this thing we're talking about, it's not a simple structure.
No, sure.
You know, because you can look at even what's been carved out and called this strap, this iliotibial band. You can look at that and say, oh my gosh, I have always seen 3 layers in it. There are 2 that are circumferential, the outer and the inner, and then there's the middle layer that's going vertical. So even if you point to, you know, this odd square inch of tissue,
sure,
what direction are the fibers going?
And then you look
in?
at it from the inside. You peel it back and look at it from the inside, and the directions that it's taking from the inside are completely different.
Yeah, and we could even say they're and they're in arcing. They're arcs. Yeah. They're not even straight lines. We know that if you draw it on a piece of paper, you'd go, look, it's a grid. But think, no, it's an arc.
So then it begs the question: does it matter if the power is in the touch and the power is in the intent? Does it really matter what we do?
It can, because I'd rather go to a well-trained therapist than someone who knows nothing. And you know, in other words, there is
poking you a bit.
There is, I think there is. As I always say, we have to approach the body humbly. It's so complex a system, and yet, if I'm going to get brain surgery, I'd rather have it be with a humble brain surgeon than a humble, mop man.
That's brain surgery, though. I mean, you're not going to get a mop man to. Could you open my skull? I mean, that's.
You know what I'm saying, though? I'm just saying here we go then. So even the brain surgeon must stand with awe and humility before the complexity of the body and question her skills and intent and mastery of the knife or the saw or the drill or the process itself, whatever the goal is through that particular surgery. You want to have all that knowledge and still proceed humbly in the face of the infinite complexity of the body that we can't explain. And that's whether you're a bone therapist or brain surgeon, doesn't matter. The bone therapists too, they've been to the classes, they got A's on the tests, they're certified, they're advanced certified, whatever it is, right? All that means is you have more permission to stand humbly before the body and listen. Hopefully, because if you're just going to get bossy because of all your degrees and such, well, then you will bear fruit for that.
Yeah, you are masters at what you do. I mean, there are people that will give themselves that label of masters, which puzzled me. But so Viscera. You turned me on to Viscera. You know, I got to that layer first, the first class I did with you, and I literally left crying. You know, I was.
You and many others. It's intimidating.
It's intimidating by it or grossed out by it. I was just didn't know anything about it. I was very intimidated by it. I was very overwhelmed and overcome by it. And you still unfairly. I hope you still say, I'm gonna get me. I love the Viscera now. I love it. You know, last 2 or 3 years I've got into it.
Glad to hear it.
I'm pulling this stuff around.
Yeah.
It's great. So I'm a great fan of it now. So you can drop the stuff about me not liking Viscera.
Done.
But I'm not sure why I like it. It's very cool. It's awesome stuff. And I'm also not sure about, with apologies to any visceral manipulators, this is for Bowen people specifically, but I'm not sure about the whole visceral manipulation thing. I think any movement is great, but I've heard people say I can locate the hepatoduodenal duct, and I'm going, well, I can just about do it with a scalpel and several years of practice, so I'm not sure you can necessarily find that with your fingers. And if you can, what do you think you're doing?
I think you'd be surprised, actually, at the level of specificity that can be achieved through intense practice with regard to sensation and difference and just paying attention that we don't get when we're dissecting, right?
Sure.
Because you don't have this energetic wave coming off of a tissue that has its own character that can be felt in the living. So I'll give them that, for one thing. And the same as any other therapy, you can have your idea of what you're doing, you can have your successes, and whether what you're doing is what you think you're doing is a whole nother story. So I've listened to osteopaths, brilliant osteopaths, who spend 8 hours a day sitting at the end of the table doing craniosacral osteopathy. Brilliant therapists with great results. And I've been to them and said, so what was going on there? And listened to their story, and I'm like, very interesting. It's an interesting story, and working within that story, that person achieves great results. That doesn't make the story true.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's something I've come to terms with over the years, that I'm happy to go, I'm not really sure exactly. 15 years ago, I'd given you chapter and verse about we're doing this and we're doing this and this is how it works. And now I get that it's a story and that it's a
I could tell the story, that there's a scarab beetle pushing the sun across the sky, and that it will set at the end of the day because the scarab beetle will bury it. Like he does his other little dung balls. Yeah. And if you were a 5-year-old living in whatever time, you might be like, cool, that's amazing, and it's true. Look, it happens every day. You don't see the scarab beetle because it's an invisible scarab beetle, but it doesn't matter. We do. This is about how we talk about the things that we do.
If it's got 5-year-olds at home, just do try this and you know how it goes. Because if I did have one still, I would definitely be doing that. It's a great story, but it is the story. It is the convincing story, I think kind of the story matters for the client and the therapist.
I'm not telling you not to have a story. I agree.
Yeah,
the story does matter. It may build confidence and rapport with the patient, or the client, however you want to call them. They want to know, what are you doing? And you can speak, but don't BS your way through that answer. To the best of my knowledge, or lately I think. And that's the best I could say, because we're dealing with the infinite complexity of the body, and all I can tell you is I get good results. Sure. Rather than giving some tap dance BS story that with complete confidence, as if that confidence is what they need, or as if that's what builds confidence. Actually, humility builds confidence, but humility with knowledge.
So you've been, how long have you been doing this dissection art now for?
This is the 22nd season.
And 22nd season, 22 years. And do you still get surprised when you open up
Every single time. Yeah. Everybody's new. Can we pay attention to each other and notice our uniqueness? Sure, that's what I'm doing. So I haven't seen the same body twice, and every time I go into one, it's the first time anyone's ever been in there, except maybe a couple surgeons. So and so it's constantly new and refreshing that way.
I know you don't have a hands-on practice to speak of anymore, but do you think that you would be able to translate that in terms of having seen thousands of bodies that are all different? Do you think that would influence and your hands-on work?
Absolutely.
In terms of how you
for sure. And I do work with my family, my kids and friends and such, and my work has become very gentle and very intuitive.
As a result of
gentle and intuitive. In other words, just if I can trust that the body will heal itself, I can also trust my own hands to participate in that healing of the human body that we all share, right? So, in other words, it's that interaction, that human interaction, that is hands touching in whatever modality you might choose. Well, this can be the most powerful thing in the world. So it doesn't, whatever it is, if you're not overly invested in your method, and you welcome the deep connection that human bodies can make in the presence of one another, there's entrainment, there's resonance, healing is happening.
Cool.
It's an opportunity to elevate another person, or to let yourself be elevated with them when you yield over to these higher powers.
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful than actually a reassurance and b a touch. No matter what the intent of the touch is, it's okay, it's all good.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to hurt, and we're going to hold your hand, and we're going to do it with you.
Yeah.
We're not going to force you through a square hoop, as it were. Gil, thank you very much, as always.
A great pleasure, Julian.
Informative, inspiring, thought-provoking. And all we need now is some... It's pretty cold over here, I have to say.
It was supposed to be the coldest day of the year. It was 36 this morning.
Did I bring it with me from England?
No, I don't think it's 36 in England even. No, we're just having a little cold snap. We had a very warm fall and early winter. So
well, I'm glad I can be of service and give you a taste of our English winter.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Gil Hedley, and with me, Julian Baker.
Mm.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome.